Hey everybody, Deathblade here. I'm coming at you with a book review video. In fact, all of the book reviews that I've done so far on the channel, there aren't very many of them. You can find them in a playlist here. They're all related to China or Chinese fantasy in some way. This one is not. This book that I'm reviewing is a Western epic fantasy novel, so it's a little bit different. I will explain about that at the end of the video. The format of the video is going to be pretty simple. First, I will give my assessment, general assessment, basically thumbs up, thumbs down. Then I will go into a brief summary, non-spoiler summary. I'll talk about some things that I liked, some things that I didn't like, and I'll cap it off with a story of why I'm doing this review that's kind of a little bit different for what I normally do on the channel. So let's get started. The book in question here is Wraithblade by S.M. Boyce. And basically, I'm going to say that my assessment is thumbs up. I do recommend it. If that's all you want to hear from me, you just stop the video now and go get the book and read it. I'll have a link in the description and the pinned comment. Suffice it to say, I really did like the book, and it was actually a little bit difficult for me to come up with some things that I didn't like about it, although I did identify some things that I will talk about in a little bit. First, getting into what this book is about, on the screen here you can see the summary from the website, and you can get the same thing, I believe, on Amazon. So if you're interested in just kind of the back of the book blurb, you can find that online yourself. Just click through to the link below. Basically, the story is about a young man who is, I guess if you were going to put it in Dungeons and Dragons terms, I think he's a ranger. Maybe he could be a fighter. Either way, he kind of lives out in the woods where he is on his own, kind of a wanderer and a drifter. And then what happens is, and this is all stuff that happens in like the first chapter or two, he gets dragged into a fight situation that he wasn't wanting to get into, and then ends up bonding with the Wraith King, who is like this ancient undead wraith ghost, I guess you could say, who gives him amazing powers. Then he goes on to befriend a local family that is in this forest area, kind of recover from his fight. And then, of course, this is this object of immense power, or this creature or being of immense power that is now bonded with him, is obviously being hunted by other powerful people in this fantasy world, and so he has to kind of deal with that. He makes some friends along the way, and of course there's a lot of fight scenes and cool stuff that happens. Basically, that's my summary of the novel. I don't want to get too deep into explaining what it's all about for spoiler reasons, but it's a pretty simple and straightforward fantasy story, primarily told from the viewpoint of the main character, although sometimes it does switch viewpoints to other characters. The part about the Wraith King being bonded with him is the part that I think actually kind of crosses over to Chinese fantasy. For those of you who read a lot of Chinese fantasy novels, especially the web content, it's pretty common for the main character of those stories to have some sort of companion that is like a mentor, gives them power, or whatever it is. For instance, in I Shall Seal the Heavens, the series that got me started down my career path as a translator, the main character Meng Hao has the parrot, Lord Fifth, and also to some extent the meat jelly, Lord Third, as his companions. Or in the follow-up to that series, the next series, A Will Eternal, main character has the little turtle, who is his kind of companion, mentor, sort of. So for those of you who are into the Chinese fantasy side, you will notice some things that are very familiar if you read this book. All right, so let's get into the things that I like and the things that I didn't like. Starting with the things that I like, basically, this is just a fun, fast-paced adventure story, and it's been a long time since I have read something like that. It almost seemed to me like I was back in my high school days. Back when I was in middle school and high school, I read a lot, especially fantasy, but my parents didn't really like me reading fantasy books, so a lot of times I was, doing it under the covers with a flashlight, that kind of thing. I didn't do that with this novel, but I have been kind of relegated to the living room a lot nowadays. My daughter is 1, and because of her sleep habits, I end up sleeping on the couch in the living room a lot. And so that's where I read this book for the most part, just sitting there on the couch before falling asleep at night. And so it really just kind of took me back in time to my high school days. And not just that circumstance of reading on the couch, but just the feeling of the story is just fun adventure. The kind of books that I really enjoyed when I was getting into fantasy, whether that was Wheel of Time or Forgotten Realms. That kind of stuff is just inspiring in an imaginative way, and that's what this book was like. Another thing that I really liked about it was the main character. He is just a good person. After all of the years of translating Chinese fantasy, where the main characters tend to kind of blur the line of morality between good and bad, And one of the big comments you'll see about Chinese fantasy novels on the Amazon reviews is people saying, I don't like this main character because he's not good. That's probably a topic for another video, although I have touched on it in past videos. But the point is, in Wraithblade, the main character, Connor, is just really a good person. He wants to help people. He will go out of his way to help people. He has a sense of like justice and what is right and wrong. And I just really enjoyed having a good guy character as the main character. I really liked that aspect of his personality. Another thing that I liked was I did like the world building. It's not thrown at you in big, exposition dumps for the most part. And I did get a sense that in this book one, we're kind of getting just the beginnings of what is going to be a much deeper and richer world. Getting into things I didn't like, I'm going to narrow it down to basically two things. One of them kind of broad and one sort of specific. The broad thing that I didn't like, and again, I'm being very nitpicky here. Overall, I just really did like the story and I had a fun time reading it. But if I had to pick something, one of the things that I would pick is I feel like there are handfuls of things throughout the story that are not very well thought out. What I mean by that is, I think sometimes it helps for a writer to step back and ask questions about something, like why, when the character is doing this one specific thing, why don't they do something else? If they're going to break in through the window, why didn't they check the front door first? I'm not saying that specifically happened in this story. I'm just saying there was a lot of things that happened that to me, I was just thinking in my mind, well, wait a second, why didn't they just do this other thing, which would have been a lot easier? And similar to that, there's a lot of situations where a character who is supposed to be very intelligent and like maybe scheming or whatever does some specific thing that is supposed to come across as being very clever and smart, but to me didn't really seem very smart. Almost like you could have taken a step back again and thought like, well, wait a second, if they do this, then what are the ramifications? So again, I know I'm being very broad in general, but that was something that jumped out to me a few different times, was things happening that kind of didn't to me make 100% sense. And on a very specific note, although I did like the supporting characters, I should have mentioned this in the things I liked. There are two supporting characters who are the companions of the main character. I actually kind of liked them a little bit more than the main character. They just were more interesting. One of them is kind of funny, comic relief, but has a serious and dark backstory. And then the other one is a lot more serious, but at the same time is a lot more interesting. I don't want to spoil it. But there is a third character who's not really a supporting character, but basically the thing I didn't like was that I found her to be, number one, kind of naive, and number two, predictable. Now, I don't like, in general, the word predictable. I'm going to do a video about that. Maybe that'll be my next video. If so, I'll link it up above. But I really dislike when readers complain about stories being predictable, except sometimes they are. Okay, so in this case, basically this character, I literally did predict what the character arc was going to be. To me, it seemed really, really obvious what this character was all about and what was going to happen. I was hoping kind of like there would be some sort of twist that would change things, but there never was. So for me, that took a lot of the tension out of that character's scenes. I wasn't really very interested in that character's story. I liked the character. She's actually a very cool character, and I like her in general. But she's very likable and competent and skilled, and she's cool. I would like to see fan art of her, actually. Well, I'd like to see fan art of all of the main cast of characters, but I'm jabbering here. The point is that there was no real tension for me in her scenes, so I found them kind of boring. I kind of knew it was going to happen. I mean, not literally. I don't want to make it sound like I predicted every little twist and turn, but I kind of saw where it was going, and it went in that direction, and then it was all over. So that, to me, was not particularly compelling. Another thing about her was that I found her to be really naive. She's supposed to be this elite, like, warrior magic user working for the most powerful family in this world. And the political system and her family are kind of a little bit sort of Game of Thrones-ish in that, there's a lot of plotting and scheming and good people who are really not that good after all and whatnot. And yet she is completely 100% clueless about that. To me, it just came across as a little bit hard to believe that she's this ultra competent person who has traveled everywhere and gone on a million missions and yet has no clue about how bad the world around her really is. But again, that's being kind of nitpicky. So this is my review for Wraithmarked. I would recommend it. In fact, I would highly recommend it if you're into fantasy novels. It's just a really solid start to a new series. The book 2 is supposed to be coming. I'm not sure when exactly. I don't think even the author knows. And now getting into the story really quickly about why I'm doing a non-Asian themed review, which incidentally, Let me know what you think about this kind of review. Would you like to hear more stuff like this from me? Reviews or recommendations that are not necessarily Chinese fantasy or Asian fantasy themed. In any case, let me get to the story now very quickly about why I'm doing the review. I am acquainted with the author. I probably should have mentioned that in the beginning of the video, but in any case, I am acquainted with the author. I wouldn't say that we're friends. I mean, it's not like we're enemies either. Just we have interacted online a few times, chatting, direct message and whatnot. So we know each other. And so a few months ago, I think at this point, there was a problem with the novel that it got pulled from Amazon, but not just pulled, but like permanently deleted and banned. And that was a mistake on Amazon's part. The book was actually put back up on Amazon very quickly, like a day or two later, and it even carried through all of they even were able to port all of the reviews for the book over, so it kept the reviews. However, that completely killed the sales momentum and history for the book. And for those of you who aren't aware, that stuff is very, very important for the Amazon algorithm and for sales in general. And so because of that, the book was basically kind of screwed over. I felt really bad, and so I wanted to help out the author, and I picked up the book so that I could do a review on Amazon. And also I told her that if I liked it, I would do a video review, which that's what I'm doing right now. So that's kind of the story of the behind the scenes of why I'm doing this. Again, please let me know what you think of this video. Reviewing books that are not necessarily specifically in the theme of the content I usually make. Don't worry, I'm not switching the channel over to a Western fantasy review channel, but I was thinking of maybe throwing in a few here and there. So again, please let me know what you think. If you are interested in Wraithblade, check it out. I'll put links in the description, and that's it for this video. I will see you next time. Godspeed.